suddenly out of the blue, I'm introduced to Ken Wilber, and Ken has a lot to say about how we do spiritual practice. It turns out that he thinks we need some upgrades. He thinks that the traditions have been incredible and reliable, and they have persevered and been preserved, and that's their strength. But there's some innovations and some new understandings that have literally come online in the last 100 years, let's say last 40 years, neuroscience. And Ken just really feels like if we're going to practice, we need to include those contemporary insights, even though they haven't stood the test of time, so to speak. But, one question that Ken would pose is, if you knew that, according to empiric studies, that to do 6 hours of sitting a day and 2 hours of physical exercise was far more effective for settling the mind, opening the heart, and teaching the truth of presence, would you sit 10? Would you change if there was empiric evidence that actually pointed that out? So the fact that the traditions don't really draw on empiricism and don't really look at what actually works, what doesn't, those are the kinds of things that Ken brought to the conversation. So Miles and I met in that context. Right. And part of what we're going to be doing on this retreat is we're going to be sharing our traditions, but we're going to be in dialogue about what we've learned about working with contemporary audiences, with people who are not monastic, with like both of us. If you think of both Miles and me, neither one of us were raised in the church or the tradition of our practice. We're both converts, and we're converts that came about in our 20s because of our curiosity and spiritual seeking. That's a very, very different kind of training than someone who grows up in the Zen tradition in Japan and studies in the church of their father. Like, we're really different in that regard. So what's the impact of that? That we've come to it out of curiosity as opposed to being conditioned into it. Lots of the parts of the traditions are dropping away because they're in the West, and other parts we're really, really committed to sustaining, and that's the kind of conversation that we want to be in. So we want to use sitting meditation. We want movement from Miles' incredible Aikido training. He's got such beautiful, he's so elegant when he moves. And part of what impressed me about Miles is that because he trained in Japan, the Roshi in the temple or the sensei in the dojo, they always have an assistant or an attendant called the jisha. And I could tell Miles had been so deeply trained in his attention to serve. That was the first thing that impressed me about Miles, is how utterly filled with service he was. The integral questions were great. The meditative, comparing notes was great. But I was so impressed by how he served, because that's a very rare quality.